listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast, where we explore the connection between a fit body and positive mental health. And our big mission? It's to help 10,000 runners to develop fitter minds in the next 2 years. I'm your host, Michelle Frost. Let's get moving. Welcome to this episode of the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. Today we talk to Susan Grober, and she emigrated to Australia as a child. Since then, she has become a cartologist for the mining industry, and then she's also retrained as a physio and as a running coach. She discovered running about 13 years ago, and like many of us, got quite carried away and excited about it. But that meant that she got injured a bit. And she was sick of seeing movement specialists who said to her, well, you can't run for a while now. You'd have to stop running. The annoying thing for Susan was that they weren't runners themselves. So she went off, she retrained herself as a physio, and now she's passionate about helping runners to keep running. Enjoy. Today on Fit Mind, Fit Body, I am delighted to introduce you all to Susan Grober. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited, as I was explaining to you off the recording. I thoroughly enjoy talking to people that I haven't met before because we can unfold who you are and all of that in this environment, which may seem a bit odd, but it is really fun to get to know you in this way. So thank you for jumping on, because it's not always the most less stressful type of thing for some people to do. Some people don't like doing it much. So appreciate that you putting your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to getting to know you too.
It's exciting. All right, let's start at the way back. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a tiny town in the southeast of Ireland in County Kilkenny called Graignamanagh. I moved over here when I was 10. So a long time ago. Well, just yesterday. And so moved to WA with my family. Spent most of my teens down in Mandurah, which is about an hour south of Perth. Yeah. And have been bouncing around the place ever since. I lived in New South Wales for a while. I met my ex-husband there. He was from Germany, so I lived in Germany for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then about 14 years ago, we moved back to Perth. So we're obviously now parted ways, but I'm still here and he's gone back to Germany. So, yeah.
Wow. You've been all over the place.
I have, yeah. And I still have lots of more traveling and wandering and exploring to do. So, but that's the journey so far.
So you still have a little bit of an accent, considering you came here when you were 10.
Yeah. I've always been a bit weird that way. I never really completely lost my accent. And I've just spent the last 2 months over Christmas and New Year's in Ireland as well. So it has actually refreshed a little bit. So it's starting to, it comes back out. And it depends on who I'm talking to as well. So if I'm with Irish people, it's full on, straight into the thick Irish accent. And when we're around Aussies, then it kind of tapers and the jargon starts creeping back in again. So you kind of adapt to whoever it is you're talking to, really.
I love that. It's kind of like being a chameleon. My father is British, and he still has I think he still has a little bit of an accent. But I know when I'm like in England and around people who are sort of British, I also pick up, maybe because I've always had him in my ear, I'm just always, I feel like a bit of a chameleon sometimes in that way.
Yeah, you definitely do. And most people who have that background, either a parent who's from overseas or, they grew up over there and lived over here as kids, they definitely fall in and out of both ways of talking, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
At least my family does it anyway.
So just out of interest, when you're in Ireland, do your friends and family there say, oh, you sound so Australian?
Yeah,
absolutely. Even though you think you're fitting right in.
Yeah, absolutely. I get called a plastic patty all the time. So
I've never heard that term. That's hilarious.
I know. My cousins are jerks, but I love them.
I love it. All right. So I assume your family moved over here for work, or your parents did? How many siblings do you have?
I have two. I've two sisters. So one older, one younger. So
Okay.
I'm alone in the middle. Yeah.
You're the middle child.
The middle child. I have all of the middle child hang-ups.
Awesome. I love that. There's lots to unpack there. Do you remember much of your schooling in Ireland?
I do. I remember a lot because they were my formative memories, really. And because my family, we love to talk about the past a lot. Like we always love to tell our stories. Yeah. So you kind of keep your own past alive by retelling all of your favorite childhood anecdotes and stories. So I do remember a lot of it. And because I've been over and back so many times, sometimes you just wander through town and you go, do you remember that time when we did this? And do you remember that time when we did that? So there's lots of memories attached to locations and people and, particular scenes and stuff that I did as a child. Yeah. And, so it comes up a lot. I do. I remember a lot of it. Yeah.
Awesome. And do you remember any kind of culture shock when you did move to Australia?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for the accent, for one, and trying to get used to people ending their sentences as if they were asking a question was probably the weirdest thing. When you were in Mandurah and everyone's like, and I went and did this on the weekend, and you're like, what is that a question? I'm not sure. What are you saying? Are you asking me something? Are you telling me something? That was weird. And I think the whole idea of barbecues and bring a plate, and because back in the late 80s, early 90s, everyone was like, bring a plate. I don't think that happens quite so much as of what it used to. But back then, like, you'd rock up with just a plate and people would be looking at you going, what'd you bring to share? And you're like,
were you hungry on the way over?
You didn't say that. You said bring a plate. But it was, the one of the things I still remember, and we talk about it a lot too, especially when you get that contrast of being in Ireland and then coming back to Australia, is how open everything feels. Okay. Like in Ireland, the cloud base level is really low. And I just remember like being here, and we came out in, I think, about August of 89. And I remember walking around my cousin's neighborhood because we stayed with them for a couple of weeks. And we were just wandering around, and we're looking up at the sky, and we're like, the sky is so big, it's so high, there's so much open air. Like over there, you've got rolling hills and mountains, so everything feels really closed in and small. And here it's like, oh my God, it's endless.
That's amazing. I haven't been to Ireland, although when I did my DNA thing, I'm very Irish. So in part, like so many Australians. But in England, my husband always whinges about the clouds always being, it just always feels like it's drizzling. And so I can understand that feeling like there's a blanket, on the sky. Yeah. And when you get to Australia, I guess that's a really good way to describe it, actually, that you did there. I like that. That's awesome. When you came to Australia, how did you find school? Did you make friends straight away, or was it all pretty unusual?
Yeah, well, I guess I was always that little odd duck, I mean, I had the double whammy of having this big, thick Irish accent, talking too fast, and then being a redhead. It didn't set me up for a good foundation as a child in Australia.
Or it provided you lots of opportunity for growth.
Oh, absolutely. You learn to grow thick skin pretty quick, that's for sure. Wow. But we got all the stereotypes of dumb Irish joke inventions and being a ginger and a ranga, and I'm like, what is
what are you talking about?
What you're saying. So it was a lot of what's the word, a lot of jibing and teasing and shit going on when we were kids. So it was not very nice.
Oh, I can apologize for those Australians.
I know. Morning. No, but I was lucky. First school I went to South Thornley Primary, of all places, for about 3 months. Yeah. And then we moved down to Mandurah. So I ended up going to Assumption Catholic Primary School. Okay. And but right from the get-go, I fell in with a really good group of girls, and I had some really good friends, and I'm still friends with them all these years later. So that's awesome. Yeah. So I was lucky. I was very lucky. I was kind of a pretty shy kid as well, so it took a lot for me to come out of my little shell. But I think I thrived here more so than I did maybe in Ireland as a kid because I
Okay.
was so shy. I think coming here kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone
Hmm.
quite a lot. And yeah, so I had to learn to grow and adapt pretty quick, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And did your sisters have the same experience? Like, are they redheads as
Uh,
well?
yeah, we're all redheads. Various shades of red, but yeah, we're all
Oh.
redheads. Yeah, I think my older sister in particular, she was never going to have issues. She's very sociable, and
Hmm.
she always got along well with people. So, she I think she did a year in Coodnup High School, and then ended up going to Colby College, which is in Rockingham, just up the road. But she never had issues. She was a smart kid as well,
Yeah.
and just hit a good group of people, and kept her nose clean. And my little sister maybe struggled a little bit because she was only 5 when we came out here, and I think she,
Oh.
in terms of schooling, she was a little behind.
Yeah.
So she repeated a year, I think, in primary school, and then after that, she was fine. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, she's still friends with her childhood friends as well.
Oh.
Like they've been
Oh.
friends since one of them, I think, or a couple of them since kindy or primary school or
Oh,
something.
wow.
So yeah, so they've been friends
Forever.
a long time.
All right.
Yeah.
At school, I suppose. Well, can you remember sport at school in Ireland, or
No,
does
we
it
don't
be more
really
here?
have sport in
Mm.
school. Like I
Okay.
remember, yeah, we didn't really have anywhere near the opportunities over there as you do here. Like
Mm.
I remember doing like like the little gymnasticy type of
Hmm.
sport things. We had the balance beam and the
Yeah.
horse that you had to crawl
Yeah.
over, and a little bit of tumbling and stuff. But any sport we did or had the opportunity to do was basically in the school ground, like playing Red Rover and hide and
Okay.
seek and tag and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
there wasn't. I think the only structured sport we had maybe was soccer and camogie. Camogie is the girls' form of the Irish sport of hurling. So, but my dad refused to let us play camogie, so I didn't get to do that.
Is that like throwing stuff? What is hurling?
No, it's
It sounds
I don't
like
know if
you're
you've ever.
throwing
It's,
something.
yeah, hurling is kind of like field hockey, but with the baseball bat, but not. But
Oh,
it's hard to describe. It's one of the fastest field sports in the world. So it's kind of like,
I feel like I've heard of it, but I can't picture it.
yeah,
Just
it's kind of
yeah.
like AFL, but with a very small leather ball and a big bat type stick like you have for hockey called a hurl.
Yeah.
And you have to run around with a ball balanced on the end of the hurl and then flick it up and hit it. It's really fast and quite violent, and it's awesome. Go Google it. You'll love it.
I will Google it. I had an
Yeah.
American lady on a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, and she was talking about some sport over there that I'd never heard of as well. I was like,
Oh,
all
there
these
you
sports I'd never
go.
heard of. This is crazy. And I thought I was around some of these things, but obviously not. So when you
No,
came to when you came to Australia, what kind of sport did you find school was dishing up to?
well, yeah, coming over here then. Oh, actually, no, I did do something. I did Irish dancing as a kid. So I forgot
Ah,
about
there you
that.
go.
Yeah, it was
Yes,
probably one of the few things I had access to. And I did a little bit of karate because,
of course. Why not?
yeah. So that was fun. But I came over here then, and I think my very first summer sport was T-ball.
Hmm.
Um, which I hated because I was shit at it. I have terrible hand-eye coordination, as it turns out. So I wouldn't have been good at camogie either.
Oh,
But and then what else did I have a go at? I had T-ball, then I did netball. I'd never played netball before, but I quite enjoyed that. I had to go basketball and then netball again, really. But then you kind of get into high school, and opportunities for sport other than what was in high school kind of
mm,
dried up a little bit.
okay.
As teenage girls go through those awkward years of, oh, I don't want
Yeah.
to sweat and look all. I never really was that type of girl. I don't mind getting sweaty and dirty, so that was never an issue. But probably year 11, year 12, because we didn't have any organized sport as part of our curriculum. Um, we actually stood up and asked our principal if we could drop a double year or double what are they called? Double class every week so that we could have 2 hours of sport once a week.
Oh.
So we all negotiated that because our principal didn't believe in free periods. So we all had to have a full plate of classes.
Yeah.
And because of that, because we never had any free time, we didn't get to play sports. So we're like, well, for our mental health and our physical health, you're asking us to sit here for hours and hours every day. Because he was really fit. Because that we need to be fit in order to have healthy minds. So we want to play sport. And they're like, okay. So we did.
I love that. That sounds like the argument that I try for everyone why they should run, so that your mind will be more healthy.
Yeah, it was great.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then year 12, I swapped courses. I was doing like home economics and biology and chemistry and physics, and I hated biology. I had about 3 teachers in the space of a year, and it just sucked. I just wasn't enjoying the course content at all. So for year 12, I swapped to geography and sports science. So I ended up doing sports science, which meant I got to do golf, and I think we did weightlifting, and I think we did, what else did we do? We did something else as well. But yeah, so I finally got a little bit of sport then in year 12 as well by doing that.
By studying it, not because it was physical education or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it was physio basically. Yeah. But yeah, we got to do sport, and I think we got to do a little bit of coaching and that kind of stuff too. So it was fun.
Did they do running, like running carnivals and cross country and?
Oh yeah, they did all that stuff too. But I wasn't exactly like a prime athlete. There was all the school carnivals and inter-school carnivals, but I think beyond year 8 or year 9, I stopped qualifying for everything. Everyone else got better, but I didn't.
Oh, can you remember what you thought about it? Like the running and the cross country and the carnival? Can you remember? Was it something you wanted to do?
Remember. It was funny, like I had this conversation with a friend of mine, like she's one of my oldest friends out here. And I remember being a kid and getting to cross country, and it was, what was it, like 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers or something.
Yeah.
And I always tried to run the whole thing, even though I was not a runner and I was not practiced at it. But I'd just go slow and steady and totter along. And while everybody was sprinting off, 5 minutes later, I'd come past going, hey. And they'd come sprinting past me again, and then 30 seconds later they'd be dying, and I'd go, hey. So I always tried to kind of run all of cross country, even though I never really ran.
That's awesome though. That kind of, if you reflect on it now to what you do now, I believe it kind of is like a sign of things to come.
It did,
those longer distances, you have to be able to find a pace that you can do the whole time.
I still remember too, like all of the Olympics, my favorite part of the Olympics every year was the marathon, or every 4 years was the marathon. So I just watched the Olympic weightlifting and the marathon religiously every Olympics. And even one of my friends said to me, she goes, you always said as a kid that you always wanted to run a marathon. So, she's like, I can't believe you actually went and did it.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll just
so
just let everyone know that you did actually run as an adult.
Not a runner, but I wanted to run a marathon.
I love that. I was really into that too, actually, when I reflect. With Robert D. Costello, I can remember him watching him run a marathon, or win one of those. It was either Commonwealth Games or an Olympics when I was a kid. And I remember thinking, oh, that looks like so much fun, if that's the right word. But just being inspired by it, I was like, that's so cool.
And they make it look easy with their 2 and a bit hours, and you're just going, oh yeah, that's not that far.
That's right. And it is just one step in front of the other. How complicated can it be?
Exactly.
Exactly, right. So when you left school, what did you do? Tell us about your life.
So left school. I ended up going to, I went to uni, as most kids do. Really took me a very long time to work out what it was I wanted to do. Yeah. So I started with medical imaging sciences, which was ultrasound and x-ray and all that kind of jazz. And I hated it. I was absolutely on the wrong end of the medical spectrum. Wow. And it was the first time in my life I ever even failed anything. I was like, I suck at it. I just couldn't engage with the content, so
It
I
sounds a
tried
bit
to
like
stick it out.
biology. I was just thinking, wouldn't have there been some clues that you didn't like biology either? And now you're
Well,
trying to
they
X-ray
were,
people's biology.
yeah, no, yeah, it was human biology, which was fine. But it was way more physics than I
Okay.
thought. And I actually I like physics, but for some reason no,
No.
it just wasn't for me. It's
Oh,
like standing in a dark room and going, press the button
like, yeah.
to move people around, press the button. It's like, no,
No. And then
not
look at
for
a
me.
grey kind of thing
Like,
on the
don't
screen.
move. Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't actually, because I wanted to help people, and that was not an environment where I was
Okay.
able to help people. So it just didn't work. So eventually got up the courage to tell my parents I was dropping out. And then took 6 months off, and then I ended up going back and doing a degree in cartography, which is map making.
Oh, that is
So
quite different.
yeah, so you may recall in year 12, I swapped to doing geography. Turns out
Yes.
I really like geography, but I didn't want to be a teacher. So this was the compromise. So I went and did cartography instead.
Wow. And what do
So
you do with
again,
cartography now in this
well,
world?
these days, like they don't even call it cartography anymore.
Hmm.
That degree has kind of evolved into something called spatial sciences. So now these days it's called geographic information sciences.
Yeah.
So you kind of work in a more digital environment, working with digital maps and terrain modeling, and everything is moved to kind of laser based terrain model captures. So
Okay.
you've got either sky based or terrestrial based, and yeah, so a lot of it is
Oh, wow.
just surface modeling. But so there's a huge demand for it in the mining sector in WA, and that's kind of
Of
where I ended
course.
up finding myself. Really,
My
yeah.
my husband has a degree in surveying with an honours in computing, and so
Yeah,
it was he was an expert in GPS a
yeah,
thousand years ago.
yeah.
No longer. Many years
Yeah,
ago.
so we had a lot of crossover classes with the
Yeah,
surveyors.
I was just
Yeah,
thinking that.
yeah.
Also in that vein, a cousin from England just visited us last week and talked about an app called These Three Words or Those Three Words. Have you heard of that? Thought you?
No.
It's bizarre. It's a really cool app. I might even put a link to it in the show notes because somebody's laid out the world as a flat sort of thing and chopped the whole world up into 3 meter squares
Oh yeah.
and assigned every 3 meter square 3 random words. So they're just, I suppose, an AI's done it or whatever, but it's 3 random words. So in some of those places where an address is quite bizarre, you can just give them 3, like our place though, in there might be 4 or 5 different 3 meter squares. Obviously, most places we all live in a bigger space than 3 meter squares, but you can give 3 words, random words, and that'll just pinpoint exactly within 3 meters squared. And I actually started thinking that was really cool when I was speaking to someone yesterday in Bali, where their address is quite hard to locate, even if you have it when you're there.
Yeah.
But if you had those 3 words for that 3 meter square,
You can find it.
get very close. Anyway, that's really interesting. Okay, so little divergence there. You were at uni and you became a cartographer and worked in the mines in West Australia by the sound of it.
Yeah, I worked with an aerial survey company to begin with. So they do the data capture, and then they deliver this information to the mining companies we were contracting to. So did that for quite a while, and then I ended up moving to work for one of the mining companies as well. So I was never actually a cartographer. I never really made maps, but I just managed and worked with the data that went behind it. So and I quite enjoyed it. I'm a bit of a tech geek for that reason.
I love that.
Like
I'm a little bit like that too. That's cool.
I find it cute, especially you get young people trying to teach me how to do stuff on the computer, and I'm like going, have you tried doing it this way? And they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that.
That's right. All those lost skills on the computer.
Right.
I feel sorry for my kids have grown up with we were doing social media and online stuff since before Facebook. And so they've grown up with parents who actually knew what they were doing and,
Correct.
And so, anyway, I think I talked to my son about TikTok before it became a big thing, for example, being relevant to right now. So anyway, it's a whole new world, isn't it?
It is.
So did that have you traveling around a lot in Western Australia working?
Not really. I was
Were you able to be
mostly
office based?
city based. Yeah, I went out a couple of times with the survey crews to actually go and have a look at what they were doing out on site. So, but that was about it. So yeah, they invited me a couple of times to go and have a look and be like an offsider for them on a couple of soirees out into the bush.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was mostly city based. Behind a desk, my big monitors,
Pushing the mouse around.
pushing the mouse around. Yeah.
So
A lot of clicks.
do you still what do you do now? What's the
So
path from
now,
there to now?
yeah, so now I'm a physio.
Because I was thinking, I didn't know that bit, and I was fairly sure that you were in some sort of I was quite surprised when you said, something non-people related, because I was pretty sure you were in a people related something.
I am now, yeah. So yeah, now I'm a physio. So 8 years ago, I got very tired of the whole corporate environment. It became very toxic there for a while. You didn't know whether or not you were going to survive the week. There were so many rounds of layoffs and all the rest of it, and it always makes it pretty difficult to find the will to go to work every day if you don't know if you're even going to have a job by the end of the day.
Wow.
So I hummed and hawed for over a year. I think I drove my entire family nuts about what to do, and then I finally made the decision to actually apply for and go back to school. So because I was such a shitty student the first time around, that P's equals degrees bullshit that they tell you, it's like, no, you actually kind of have to do stuff.
What?
But I didn't know that. Right?
Ridiculous.
So yeah, it turns out physio is kind of hard to get into, and you need a minimum academic requirement as a mature ager to go back. So I ended up, I went to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame offer exercise and sports science and physiotherapy, but they also do a double degree of both.
Oh, wow.
So physio is normally 4 years, and then a double degree is 5 years.
Yeah.
But because I didn't have the qualifications to do physio, I went and did sports science anyway, with the view to potentially just swapping over, because I had been told that was a valid pathway. And then so I went in, did my first year of exercise sports science, fell in love with it, and then actually I did really well. But I actually applied to go and do the double degree then, because I wanted to keep the sports science part. So I ended up doing that. So I did a double degree in exercise and sports science and physiotherapy. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, yeah, I guess we should go back a tiny bit. Why did you decide that physiotherapy / sports science was a thing that you wanted to explore? If you came from, as you said, quite a professional and techie kind of environment for however long that was, and then is that quite different? What was the reasoning? Can you remember?
Well, the reasoning, like I said, like when I first graduated or left school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I did want to do physio, but I didn't qualify then either. I didn't get the ATE score. I'd been really sick through year 11, and it turns out I had Crohn's disease. Oh, gosh. So I was anemic, and I was falling asleep in class, and I lost lots of weight, and I scraped through high school. I did well enough to get into uni, but not enough to do what I really wanted to do. Yeah. And like I said, not the best student anyway. I went through the entirety of high school having not learned how to study. So, still my biggest critique of high school, teach kids to actually learn. Anyway, I digress. So I wanted to do physio, but I didn't get the marks for it. Ended up doing what I did. I met my husband, moved to Germany. I actually taught English over there for a while. Then came back, got back into the spatial sciences part. And then just after we got back, we got into running. And that's where my running journey started coming in. So I have a friend of mine, he's practically family, from my hometown. He'd gotten into running, and he'd run a couple of marathons. And he's an amazing storyteller. So he used to regale us with all of these stories.
He's Irish. Aren't you not all? Sorry to interrupt. Are you not all storytellers?
Yeah. So he's
from all storytellers.
Exactly. But he was hilarious. He tells about all about his running adventures, and he just made it sound so amazing. So we're like, bugger it, let's go do it. So my ex got into it first, and then I got jealous, and then I started coming along, and so began the actual running journey.
Wow. So how long ago was that? If we were
that was 2010, so it's like 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being a newbie runner, having never really run more than, a K or two in cross country in high school, I got all of the newbie runner injuries. I got Achilles tendinopathies. I got Morton's neuroma, rolled ankles, you name it, I had it. And the vast majority of approach by the physios that I was going to see was stop running, no running for 4 weeks. And if when you're a runner and somebody tells you that you can't run, like mental health, I was like going, no, I'll give you 2 weeks.
That's why on the podcast we often have a question around, what do you, your identity, an identity question. Like, and if you consider yourself a runner and then you can't run for a while, how do you deal with that? And that's sort of really what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. It becomes quite dangerous to people who do rely on it for their mental health.
Exactly.
So anyway, so that is really what catalyzed my wants to go and become a physio, because I was also meeting all of these people who were, these movement specialists, but didn't run themselves. Or you tell them that I've got a marathon in 4 weeks, will I be able to run? And they're looking at you going, how far is that?
A 5K marathon? That's
it. So it's a 5K marathon? Like, no. So, and the whole not running thing was just not an option. So I was like, there has to be a better way of doing this. So I wanted to go back and study and become a physio who could talk to runners and not say, why would you do that to yourself?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So that was it, really. That was the main reason.
You wanted to become a part of the solution.
That's it. I wanted to be an empathetic shoulder to the crazies.
They're not crazy.
Well, you know what I mean. You otherwise would be.
I can remember, back when I started running as an adult in my 20s, and just becoming an evangelist for it. And in my head, I just, and still, obviously, I'm doing a podcast now in my 50s, and I still don't understand why people don't just run. It's weird.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
I still feel like an evangelist. And at the time when I was becoming, this evangelist runner, my mother had just completed her therapy degree. So she became a therapist, an art therapist. But I was completely convinced that actually they didn't need art. Anybody with mental health problems, they just need to go for a run. And actually still believe that. Although art is good too. It's a good medium. Don't get me wrong.
Nice balance.
Yeah, they could do both. So I do understand that. And I can remember running thinking there must be, just like that's what you were saying, that with the physiotherapy, that there's got to be, better ways to introduce it to people so that it becomes like brushing your teeth for me in this sort of vein. But I love that you weren't just going to go into a therapist's office and just accept that they said, well, how far is a marathon even? And, do you really, no, you can't. Instead, you open the question why, and then you go and take responsibility even. That's probably a better word for the why, finding out yourself, not just accepting what another person who doesn't have your experience.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody knows their own body like, you do.
Yeah.
So, when you have professional people telling you, all right, well, we understand the physiology of it, but not necessarily how your body's going to respond to treatment as well. It's sometimes you need to take a little bit of personal responsibility to know when you can and when you can't.
Yeah.
And even now I find my role isn't about telling people not to. It's about helping them find out what they can do that provides enough stimulus to provoke a healing or a what's the word? Yeah, healing, really, depending on what they've done, but without stopping them entirely from doing what it is that they enjoy doing. And there's very few things that you can't run through, at least in a small amount anyway.
Number one, the podcast is full of people saying the doctor told me I'd never run again.
Yeah.
Clue, they're on a podcast about running. They kept running, or they got over the injury or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I often think about on the podcast when we have these conversations is the fact that it's very holistic, like our bodies, and as you said, we're individuals, but we still don't know just how much effect this, our brain has. So some people will hear from the doctor, you can't run again, and that's it. They actually never will. Or somebody said to them a long time ago, your knees weren't made to run, you'll never run. And they really believe it. It's drilled into their brain. Yeah. Whereas, they might come and see someone like you and they've got an injury that may not be very easy to treat, but actually a big portion, I don't know what the percentage is, and I don't think anybody does yet, or whether we ever will,
certainly not.
Is in what's going on in their head as to how they will be able to recover from whatever that injury is.
Yeah. I mean, we see that all the time, especially in the medical field. It's like we wouldn't have this idea of a placebo effect if the placebo effect didn't actually work. Exactly. So there is absolutely a mind over matter in terms of what you tell yourself and how your body responds to that. So you can either facilitate or you can debilitate, depending on what you believe.
I love that. That's a great saying. You should put that in little quotes.
I will. I'm full of those.
TM. I love that. Well done.
We see it all the time in terms of people's response to medical treatments, or a placebo treatment, or there's so many times when you talk to or about, or I've heard, and there's some people I know this has happened to directly, like family members have been given a terminal diagnosis, and they may have been given 6 months to a year, and they're dead inside of 6 months, whereas somebody with exactly the same diagnosis, same prognosis, and 3 years later they're still kicking because they just refuse to give in. So it really does come down a lot of the time to how you want that fight to go. So if you put the work in, if you have the belief that your body can and does respond, I mean, I don't expect miracles from people either, and I certainly don't promise them, but I hate this idea of telling someone that they can or will never be able to do something, because I just don't believe that. And I think it's entirely up to them to decide what they want to believe in terms of what their outcomes will be. Because I don't know how their bodies are going to respond. I don't know what kind of work they're going to put into themselves. And I'm certainly not going to hold them back from at least trying. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it doesn't mean that we can't explore those options first.
I mean, the world is full of inspirational stories of, people with 2 arms who climb a mountain.
Yeah.
Like, that's true. You just think, what?
Yeah.
And on the surface, you think, how on earth? But it's happened,
Absolutely. And I mean, I get to work with one of those people on a regular basis now. One of the girls I coach, she had a tumor on her spine several years ago and was told that she would be lucky to walk again, let alone, and she would never run again. And she just finished Delirious 200 miler and is going on to do the Triple Crown this year.
Oh my Lord, that's crazy. I mean, it's crazy anyway, but irrelevant of all the other free story.
Yeah, and she's a constant source of inspiration to me, because she's just the happiest person, because she's just given this second lease on life, and she's just not letting a moment go by. And I'm like, yeah, you go, girl.
We can learn so much, can't we, from people who show the way like that. That's incredible. All right, back a little bit to your story. It sounds like you started running before you quit the cartography, which wasn't cartography kind of job, and it got very stressful there. Did you find that running was helpful to deal with some of that stress during that period?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I before I started running, I was that typical desk worker who would have the noddies by 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and be like, give me the coffee, give me the chocolate, I need to stay awake. And it's not that my job then was terribly stressful. I actually really enjoyed it, but it was very mentally intensive because there was a lot of concentration. And I'd always been active in my 20s, and then when we came back from Germany, I wasn't really in any kind of habit of exercising, and I put on quite a bit of weight, and I was very uncomfortable. So for all of the reasons that most people start, that's why I started. So like I started with a boot camp, and just to give me a kickstart as a pre-30th birthday present.
Mhm.
And then after I turned 30, then I actually started running because our friend was running, and we started running with the West Australia Marathon Club
Yeah.
here in Perth, and that's when that journey kind of began, really. But yeah, it definitely helped. The more I did, the more energy I found I had.
Mhm.
The clearer I became. Like I stopped having those afternoon nodsies, which
Yeah.
I found incredible. I'm like, how is it that I'm doing exercise but yet I have more energy? Like, what is this? Is this a kind of magic?
It doesn't seem to make sense on
No,
the
it
scale,
doesn't.
does it?
No, it doesn't. You've been up at 6 o'clock in the morning, gone for an hour run, and then by 3 o'clock you're feeling great.
Yeah, and you don't need to have that chocolate bar necessarily, or whatever, the coffee to
Exactly,
stay awake.
yeah, and your clothes start feeling a little bit better, and you feel better about yourself,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it definitely helped. I think about 6 months after I started running, I decided I wanted to run my first marathon as well. So inside of a year of running, I actually did. So I ran the Perth Marathon back in
Wow.
2011, and it did teach me so much about resilience, about dedication to training, about how routine based I was. I hadn't
Mm.
realized how important it was for me to have a regular routine to function
Mm-hmm.
well
Yeah.
as an adult. I thought I'd be bored with routine, but it turns
Mm.
out I'm boringly boring.
Well, it actually
Like,
gives you more freedom. That's what I
it
often
does.
say.
It does.
Yeah, like if you
Yeah.
plan, you actually get more freedom if you plan your
You
time.
do. And I
Schedules.
was definitely fitting a whole lot more into my day
Mm.
by having a regular routine of training and working and
Mm.
socializing. So,
Yeah.
there was a nice balance. I had a really good balance there for quite a long time. Yeah, but it really gave me the confidence to actually go back and study as well. I
That's
really
interesting.
found, even during study, that when you have those moments where you feel completely overwhelmed, you've got
Mm-hmm.
so much to do, and physio is a really full-on course. You've got at least 20 hours of contact every week, and
Mm.
then study on top of that. And for a lot of the kids, they were working as well. I had the luxury of not having to work,
Yeah.
but I don't know how I could have squeezed that into my life. Like,
Mm.
it was full on. But you definitely have those moments where you feel completely overwhelmed. You've got 15 assignments to do. You've got 2 weeks to get it all done before your exams start. You haven't even started studying yet. And you're just going, oh. And it was literally moments where I would just sit down or just gather myself, refocus, and just think about the resilience that I had to be
Mm.
able to dedicate myself to my training, to push myself through a marathon or an ultra marathon, because I'd done a few ultras by that stage as well. And yeah, I just was able to dig deeper into this mental fortitude that I developed that I
Mm.
otherwise probably wouldn't have had, or definitely wouldn't have had, and I would have crumbled.
That's
I would have
interesting.
definitely fallen apart.
Go running. It's like a super
Yeah,
panacea for everything.
it really was. It really is, I think. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of self-reliance and a lot of resilience in me now that I never had in my 20s and even early 30s. Yeah.
Wow. A lot of people on the podcast have talked about that, especially when they've pushed themselves to those distances of a marathon and beyond,
Yeah.
and how it gives them a level of, self-esteem or self-efficacy, if you like,
Efficacy. Yeah,
that
absolutely.
they can now achieve
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah,
that they put their mind to it if they really want to do it. And I just
I
think
think
that's
so.
such a powerful thing.
Yeah, I think it definitely translates into your regular life in terms of giving you, like you said, that self-efficacy of being able to say, you know what, I've done this, I can do this too.
I love
So,
it. I love it. So obviously you haven't really stopped running through all that. So you've been through change of careers, literally going to university for 4 or 5 years. You've also
yeah,
had a divorce in there, which is not one of the more pleasant things, having had one
no,
myself in my life. But running stayed with you through that entire time, and I assume been quite helpful, as you just said, it was really helpful for the study.
definitely.
But I assume
Yeah,
it
yeah.
supported you in other ways during that time too.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a shit year last year in particular. So my marriage ended about a year ago,
Mhm.
but my dad had passed away a few months before that.
Mm.
So I was reeling from that already, and
Yeah.
then I also had the confounding factors of both of my sisters moving away. So one's now over
Oh.
in Queensland, and the other one has actually moved back to Ireland. And
Oh, wow.
yeah,
That's a big move.
it was a big
Wow.
move, but yeah, so it
Yeah.
was a lot for me in particular, having my mum went with my younger sister as well, so
Oh,
she was over
wow.
there for about 7 months.
Yeah.
After my ex and I split, I sent him home to go and be with his family because he hadn't been
Yeah.
home since pre-COVID times.
Yeah.
And when he came back, he was like, "I'm moving back to Germany," and I'm like, "Okay."
Okay.
You know, 3 weeks after he got back, he moved home again.
Oh,
So all of a sudden, for like the first time in nearly 20 years, I was completely by myself.
you didn't have all that sort of normal family support around either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Mm.
I have cousins down here, but I didn't have my immediate family around
Yeah.
me. But I kept running and kept lifting heavy things through all of that. And then I took a little bit of time out, went to spend a couple of weeks in Queensland, and it had been rolling through my mind for a long time that I wanted to hike the bib track, the Bibbulmun track.
Mhm.
So I kind of made that decision while I was there that when I came back, I was going to squeeze it because I work for myself. I was only working 4 days a week. I was going to squeeze it in on my weekends.
Yeah.
So starting around the beginning of September, I did 3-day hikes almost every weekend, right up until just before I went back to Ireland in December.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so I put aside 10 days towards the end where I was going to do the last 350 Ks, which is strangely enough the Delirious West course.
Oh.
I didn't quite get there. I got about 200 Ks in and then the wheels fell off, but
Oh,
it probably worked out for the best because it was a beast. It was already a beast. And I had so much to do at home. I would have been dead.
yeah.
I think I would have had a day to come back, do my laundry, pack my suitcase, and then
Get the
jump on a
plane.
plane.
Yeah.
So it was never going to be a good idea.
Mm.
But yeah, so the hiking really kind of took over the end of last year for me. I did a lot of hiking in Ireland with my mum when I went over,
Yeah.
which was really nice. So I'm just starting to get back into
Mm.
running again. But thankfully, I do have a really nice aerobic endurance base in there. It's just trying to remind my
Yeah.
body now that it likes to run. So yeah, we're
The
working
hiking,
on it.
it sounds like you took a tent and it was
Yeah,
like they were 3-day, because we do a lot of that here in Tasmania where I am.
yeah.
Um, yeah, 3-day hiking, quite a bit. Anyway, so I can picture it. I can see it in my head what it was like. But that's amazing. So did you find that time out in the bush on the trail quite cathartic, like a time for you to deal with everything that had gone on for the year?
Definitely,
Mm.
definitely. I've written a couple of blogs about it on my Facebook page as well,
Mhm.
and I think in a lot of ways I was using it as a bit of a timeout for myself. I wasn't really ready to deal with a lot of the social issues around being single
Yeah,
for the first time in 18
yeah.
years. Um, and then being alone so much at home as well.
Mm.
So I was trying to come to terms with the social isolation of being by myself, but on my own terms,
Yeah.
and not being so much of an emotional burden on my family and friends, which I now realize was stupid and I should have actually spent more time with them too. But in the moment, it was catharsis for me mentally, but also physically.
Mhm.
Um, Through all of the stress, I really hadn't been moving much either, and I felt like shit. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lie.
Mm.
So it was a way for me to get that baseline fitness back, as
Mm.
well as be with my own thoughts, work my way through it, and try and get my sense of resilience back because I really
Mm.
was starting to feel like I was losing it.
Yeah.
That self assured, not self assuredness, but that self awareness and that motivation to just be on top of what my life I wanted my life to be.
Yeah.
So to have that routine, to have that discipline, to commit to routine and to
Mm.
training, and to do all of the things I know that I can do and have done, but I'd kind of lost it there somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So this was like my short circuit reboot to get back on track.
short circuit, but quite intense, I would think. So
It's been
for it to
really
be
intense at times, yeah.
three days. But it's funny though, because on reflection, well, I don't know if you think this, but if I was you, and I was reflecting on being you, I was, which I cannot do, by the way, but when I went through a divorce, for example, I ran more. And my mum would say, who's the therapist, said, what are you running away from? So it affects us in different ways. But I wondered whether it was setting a goal of a big race or something, or if you'd, to keep you motivated, if you'd kept running through some of those, the earlier times, like your dad passing and things like that, whether it would have helped or not. I mean, I don't know, but just on reflection, sometimes you wonder, was there a space for that in there? And would it have given you time to deal with it as those things were happening? Or did you need to maybe take that break? I mean, everyone's different.
I think I needed to take a break because it was a double-edged sword. And the thing is, I'd only just come back to running as well when my dad passed. But here's the rub. Dad passed away while I was in the middle of a race. So I was over in South Australia doing the Heiston 50K, and then I found out about that. So to be honest, like running all of a sudden became something traumatic.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So there was this negative reinforcement there for a little while that I had to just kind of work my way through again. And it's not the first time it happened. I'd had a hip injury as well, and every time I ran it was painful. And while I was studying, finally went to my friend who's a physio, and she sorted me out and got me back running again. But this was the second time it had happened to me that something really negative had happened in the middle of around a run. So I just needed to take a step back and kind of refocus. So getting into the hiking at least was a soft launch to get me back into running.
I love that. I love
to break down trauma a little bit.
Because I mean, I love hiking as well. So to me, it sounds like a perfect plan. And there is no perfect, and what's happened has happened, and all of that. It's just interesting sometimes to reflect on why we do what we do, and and how we're going to learn from it as we go forward.
Well, I had enough insight to know that I just needed to take a break, but I hadn't intended on taking that long a break.
Oh well, look at you now. What's your goals now? It is.
Goals this year is just try and get back to a bit more consistency. But there's a wonderful event over here called the Waters Trail and Foot, or WTF to us locals.
Yes.
And I've been involved with it every year since its inception back in 2013.
Wow.
Our wonderful ultra running godfathers over here. I won't call him grandfather because he's not much older than me. Dave Kennedy, it's one of his wonderful races. So that is a 50 miler or a 100 miler. And last week he introduced a 50K. So I want to try and get and do the 50K with that, because I normally run the finish line every year. This year I want to do the 50K for that one, and then and then I'll hang out at the finish line and cheer everybody else on like I normally do.
So when is that?
That's in September. It'll be the September long weekend. So I've give myself plenty of time to try and find some consistency, and I'll probably try and pick a couple of smaller goals along the way. But like I've come back into just a whirlwind of stuff to do after coming back from Ireland. So I barely even had time to breathe yet, let alone work out what races I can do and can't do. So we'll see.
What will consistency look like for you?
Consistency for me is back running 3 to 4 times a week to start with. And being in the gym at least twice a week as well. So it's heavy strength training is one of the core principles of how I run my physio practice. And I run strength training classes for our trail and ultra runners over here as well.
So do you do them in person, or are you online?
So I do programming for some people who can't get to see me, who are either clients or they're athletes I coach, or I do run in-person classes here as well. So
Awesome.
So,
that's one of my
especially
downfalls as a runner is the strength. So like
yeah,
I've just
it is
used
for
this.
most of us.
I'll
Either don't know where to start,
I'll
or you
start
kind
it
of
and then I'll be like, oh, this is really
yeah,
boring now. And then weeks into it, no, I'm
yeah,
not enjoying this and this is
exactly.
too hard. I'll just go for a run.
But we got plenty of evidence to know, especially as we start getting older, that it becomes more and more and more
I
important
know.
for us to stay really
That's
strong.
why
So
I whinge about
yeah.
it more and more on the podcast. I need to start doing something. One of the days, that's why talking to people like you is really good for me. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like to give the lectures about, the importance of doing all that stuff.
Good.
Yeah. But it's good. I mean, I've had plenty of examples, even in the last few years, of how beneficial it's been for people who are injury prone in particular.
Yeah.
Getting them to a point where they stop getting injured and then they can
Mm-hmm.
actually progress on their running the way they really want to. So it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Even I think like counseling session for me, when I did my fastest marathon back in 2013, so I was in my 40s, I was going to the gym a lot.
Yeah.
And so I have that historical thing, but like you, 2 weeks after that, I had a stroke.
Yeah.
And I connected even now, even though I may or may not have been related. It was only a minor stroke and didn't interrupt my life at all. So whatever, but it is
scary.
still a thing. And you think, was it because I was pushing myself so much doing my normal, had already run plenty of marathons by then, but the regular strength training in the gym for say 4 months prior was the only difference. And so that, like you, that with the little bit of trauma around it, I'm like, maybe that's why I'm not very good at sticking to it. So I need an excuse. Why am I not very good at sticking to strength/gym work? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, do they know what caused your mild stroke? No. Don't know. Yeah. So I mean, you may have just been one of the unlucky ones. If it was an ischemic stroke or an obstructive stroke, it's just, was it a small brain bleed or, so unless you have underlying health factors like high blood pressure, then
I'm like middle of the road, healthy, like just everything in my life is middle of the road. Yep, that's exactly what it should be.
Middle of the road. That's all right. Being average is perfect.
I'm just average.
Nothing wrong with being average.
Except that I run a podcast.
In fact, it's a safe place to be.
That's right. It's a very safe place to be. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just shit luck, really.
Yep. So I just need it's a thing. Absolutely. That I need to deal with in my brain, I think, to make me become more consistent. Because elements of it I enjoy, like the gym stuff or the strength stuff, and there's other elements that I don't. So I just need to get over the fact that I do things that you don't enjoy, which is actually we talk about on the podcast a bit. Get used to getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Being uncomfortable, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what distance running really is about. And in fact, just straight out running for many people is uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Relevant of the distance.
One of my friends, he's an incredibly talented runner, but he hates running. So we have these conversations all the time, and he won Delirious last year.
Wow.
And but anyone who knows him knows that he'll always come through aid stations, and even my battery's about to die on my laptop. And he will bitch and moan about how much he hates running and this sucks and like, why am I doing this and who does it? Why does everyone do this? But he's ridiculously talented at it. It's like, I hate you so much. I love running and I'm shit at it. Can we swap?
My husband was an elite rower, and so running was the thing that they did in the off season, and they all full of testosterone young men, and so it was never a fun experience. It was like throw up kind of running, that kind of speed every time. So he runs with me, but there's an episode on the podcast and it's called The Reluctant Runner, because he's a bit like he does not like because it's all connected to this experience of
traumatizing.
Exactly. But so I totally understand that. With your running, do you prefer to run on the trails or on the road?
Definitely trails. Love trails. I'm probably a better road runner than I am a trail runner, to be fair, but I love the trails. I love being out there. I love, the salt and the sweat and the backpack chafe. And, I'm really pale as well. So, 50 million layers of sun cream. But I love it. I love being under the trees, and I love the gravel under my feet. And I love that you can run for hours and hours and it feels like 5 minutes sometimes, So you get so wrapped up in being present in the moment that you literally lose hours out there. And I love that.
Yeah. And that's ideal, really, isn't it? That's what a lot of the things I talk about is that trying to be more mindful and being more present and in the moment. I think trail running in particular leads you to that. I think there's a whole bunch of studies, like the tree bathing. I think it's in Japan. It's called about why they're getting out in nature is so beneficial for us when we're trying to elicit those experiences for ourselves and to be able to be more present.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of research around how affected we are by nature. So, for people who are finding it difficult to be grounded or difficult to find that being present in their own lives, I think everyone can benefit from getting out and sitting under a tree for a while and just watching life go by.
Give it a hug. I don't know about you, but when I'm hiking,
me
too. When I'm hiking, I always touch the plants and the leaves and the trees and even the rocks. I'm like, that's right. It's kind of crazy. I feel like I'm right in nature now. Grounding.
I got in the habit while I was hiking because everywhere I went, there's like the little ferns that kind of, and because they start out like a little fist and then they unfurl. If they're standing there on the edge of the trail in their little fist form, I'd come back and give them
that's so cute.
Little fist bump.
I love it. That's perfect.
I'm not a flower person. Everyone gets very excited about orchids on the big track, and I'm like, it's a flower, but those are the ferns.
I love them. Well, we went hiking a couple of weeks ago here up in the mountains, just 2 days, and I got up because I'm doing a run streak. That's my stretch at the moment, is to make sure I run every day. So I had to run even though we were hiking. So I'd taken my running shoes. I got up early in the morning as the sun was come up and went for a run on the trail, which was almost impossible to run on because it's not really a trail there. Anyway.
Look, you're out there, it counts.
But I still did it. So anyway, they had little flowers and they were all closed. And then by the time we all went for the hike up the same place that I ran in the morning, they were all starting to open in the sun. And I was like, that is so cool. Because anyway.
All of a sudden the sun comes out.
So the sun comes out and then they decide to open up. I just thought I'm sure there's 1,000 metaphors we could apply to that because I loved it. Anyway, that's my sharing of my little bit of nature. Can you think of a time in your runs where you have everything's flowed? So just one particular time. Can you tell us about
absolutely. I probably experienced moments of flow before I even knew what it was. And I just remember there have been multiple runs that I have been on and I've completely lost myself in my run. Like I've almost become completely detached from my own body. And there are those moments where you're running and you're running, but you can't feel your legs. That's the only thing I can put it down to. Like I've literally gone into my own head so far that I'm completely weightless.
That's amazing.
So and it doesn't always last terribly long, and sometimes it can. Sometimes it can be like an hour-long run, and you do a body. I like to do body check-ins, like to see where am I at, how am I feeling, and I just like have a literally scan down my body and go, I can't feel my legs.
Oops, I left them behind.
Or you get to a point in your run and you're like going, oh, am I here already? So definitely autopilot. That tends to happen more when I'm road running, not so much when I'm trail running, because trail running you do have to watch where you're going. But yeah, it's been a rare thing, but that's always the thing that I know. I know I'm a runner again, and I know that's a stupid thing to say. When I have at least momentary passing, I can't feel my legs.
I love that. Because
Yeah.
I often ask, as I said before, do you call yourself a runner? And then that leads on to your identity thing. So you just said a runner again. So you've obviously, that's a different answer to what people have ever said to me on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I do. I felt like if you asked me like what do you do? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm a physio and I'm a runner, so it is attached to my
Identity.
personality quite a lot. I identify that as being part of who I am as a person, even though I might not always be running. And it's certainly been through a period where I haven't actually run at all for like about 3 months. And I went for a run last night, and it's probably the first run by myself literally in 3 months, and it was awesome. I mean, it sucked. It was hard, but it was just so nice to know that I still could.
Do you listen to things when you're running? Like
I never really got in the habit of listening to music or podcasts. I don't even hike with music. I don't even hike with podcasts either. Like I said, I like being present in what it is I'm doing, and I find it just distracts me too much.
Yeah.
So right from the get-go, I kind of got into the habit of listening to my body. And if I can't hear my breath, I can't judge what pace I'm going at. And I always tend to overdo it if I'm listening to music. So if I'm going for an easier and moderately paced run, then I need to be able to hear myself.
Wow. Because some people will say, I listen to stuff because I don't want to hear my breath.
Yeah, I do. I do. I want to hear it all.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Oh. How long do you think you'll run for?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, I hope I die running. Excuse me.
Fair enough.
No, I don't think it's something that, especially if you call yourself a runner, I don't think that there's a limitation on when that needs to end. I think it's more a case of as long as my body will let me. Yep. And one of the reasons, I preach about lifting heavy stuff is about longevity in what it is that you do and how you identify yourself. So if you want to be a runner into your 80s or 90s or literally until the day you die, then I do everything I can to make sure that I get there or do that or can do that. So
and
I'm not putting a timeline on it.
The reason I would want to be a runner and do want to be a runner forever is that that then means that I can, because I've always said I'm going to live to 100 and get a letter from the Queen, who doesn't exist. She's not alive anymore, but that's what I always said.
King Charlie.
Since I was a kid, but that doesn't work. It was always going to be a letter from the Queen. Anyway, that's irrelevant. In order to do that, I don't want to live to 100 and be in a wheelchair and not be physically able to do everything that I do now within reason. But I want to be able to walk up and down stairs easily. Without getting out of breath. I want to be able to get the groceries out of the car and just be able to fit in and feel as vital. Maybe that's the word. I want to be a vital 100, whatever.
I agree. So I've always been of that mindset too, where I want to age well. You see so much in today's aging population, particularly the boomers, because they're just aging sick, so they're a massive cost to our medical system just because of their comorbidities, with diabetes and heart disease and strokes and so many of these things are lifestyle related. So if you can mitigate that just by staying as active as you can for as long as you can, and eat healthy and not drink too much, then
moderation.
It's why wouldn't you? I'd rather be a functional 80, 90, 100-year-old than bedbound and dependent on others. I mean, I couldn't think of a worse way to be. And to me, that's no.
And probably the layer on that of mental health is also what I would add these days as well.
For sure. And the older people are far more susceptible to depression and mental health.
Yeah.
Issues. and it's not just because of their aging bodies, but also their social isolation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, running is just another way to stay socially involved. By
Mm.
staying as fit as you can for as long as you can, then it gives you that capacity to be out and integrate into your community and be a part of your community,
That's
you know,
right.
and that in itself helps mitigate mental health. Yeah.
A lot of people on the podcast talk about they started running for physical reasons. They wanted to lose weight or whatever, but they
Yeah.
stay running because of the people that they met.
Absolutely.
The
And I
running
think
community.
that has absolutely been my experience as well. Like I said, I started running with the marathon club, and you know, the beautiful friends that I met through that are who encouraged me to keep going and to keep striving to do further and further distances. You know, and they're perfectly normal, average, you know, people, and they're already running marathons. And I'm like, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? So I do
So
it.
you did.
And
I love it.
yeah, you know, and it got to the point where, like, my friend and I both ended up becoming race directors for the Perth Half Marathon, just because we wanted to give back to that side of the community. And then along comes Sean Kessler with his ultra series, and then I just started volunteering at his races, and now we're really good friends. And you know, that community is my family as well. So yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but I wouldn't substitute that for anything. Yeah.
So what do you think your life would be missing? It sounds silly. I always ask this at the end of the podcast, but I'm really fascinated by it. What do you think your life would be missing if you hadn't started running? What would you?
I don't think I would be I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, because I don't think I would have ever developed that self-efficacy and have that resilience to actually take on the intensity of study that I needed to be able to do, and to be able to overcome the things that I have, if I hadn't started running. And I certainly wouldn't have learned the value of volunteering and of giving my time, and how rewarding that can be, and then the community that comes with it. So there's a lot to be said for committing to something, contributing to something. You know, that old act, belong, commit, you know, thing, the community involvement thing that was rolling around for years. There's a lot to that. There really is. And I think that has contributed significantly to who I am as a person now, and to my quality of life. Because I'm not really sure I would have gotten through the last 12 months as well as I have had I not had my community around me. So it's been huge for me personally.
Love it.
Yeah.
Is there anything about running we haven't touched on that you would like to bring up?
I see people all the time saying, I'm not a runner. I could never do that. And it makes my heart cry, because if you go down to any event, you will see people who look like you doing the things that you just said you can't do.
Yeah.
All you need is a starting point. And if you don't know where to start, find somebody who can teach you. So there's nothing wrong with finding a running coach. There's nothing wrong with finding a running club. Just get started. It is literally one foot in front of the other. You start slow. And as a friend of mine once told me, she said, Susan, if you can run for half an hour, you can do anything. And I took that advice to heart, and then went and ran a marathon.
Look at you. And then a bit more.
And then a bit more. And then I just kept going.
I like the fact that there's really no end.
There's no end. There's no limitation. You know, you get to decide where your limits are. And if you haven't found what they are yet, keep going.
Yeah. It's kind of exciting if you don't. I like the journey as well. I think that falling in love with that journey and knowing that there is no destination, it's a kind of a funny thing, because we've always been built around, you know, destinations and getting there. But the reality is, if you can figure out that the journey is actually the fun bit, and that the destination is actually, when you get there, that's not the destination. There's another one coming, and there's another one and another one.
I think that's one of my core principles as a coach as well, is trying to get that across to people, that the thing that changes you is the training. It's not the race. The race is just the cherry on top.
Yeah.
But the journey is your training. The journey is the thing that teaches you about yourself. It teaches you about commitment, about dedication, about working for something.
Yeah.
And you don't get that cherry on top unless you work for it.
Yeah.
And
So
you
true.
learn more about yourself in that process than you ever will throughout the course of the race.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. I have used up a lot of your time. Before we go, though, and we could talk for another few hours, but we won't, because it's not fair on other people. And then I'll have to cut the podcast up into 3. Before we go, though, can you give me some tips for beginner runners? If someone comes up to you and they're a complete beginner, I know you sort of touched on it a minute ago, but what would you say to someone who wanted to start running? Where would you point them?
Running doesn't mean running all the time. Start with a run walk strategy and you'll get there much quicker than you think you will.
Yeah, that's true. I've had, Australia, some of Australia's best runners and trail runners on here, and they all talk about how they walk as well. And people are like, what?
Absolutely. Walking is an important part of running.
Exactly. It's crazy. All right, don't jump off because I'll say goodbye to you off the recording as well. But I just wanted to express my gratitude for the time that you've sharing some of your journey, which has been very inspirational to me, and I'm sure it will be to others as well. It's been a delight to get to know you, Susan. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. I'd love to talk to you about your running journey. So send me a message on Facebook or on the website, and let's do it. For a bunch of resources on mindful running that will help you get and stay mentally and physically fit, head over to the website fitmindfitbody.co, and I'll see you there. Plus, I'll be back here in your podcast player a few times a week. Hit subscribe now so that you don't miss an episode. And before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a review. It'll help more people to find the podcast and get inspired to start running. I'll see you soon. Bye.